addition to both the Budget Committee and Armed Services Committee, and I'm just so pleased with her grasp of defense issues and her passion about it. Senator Ayotte.
Thank you. I would ask permission to enter into this colloquy with my colleagues.
Without objection.
Thank you. It's an honor, certainly, to speak after the senator from Alabama, who is the ranking Republican on the Senate Budget Committee. And he knows better than anyone else here that, as my colleague from South Dakota said, had we do a budget for our country, then we don't find ourselves in a situation like this where we're going to put our national security at risk. And it's been over 3 years since this body has done a budget. I think it's outrageous, and having been elected in 2010, I'm so angry about that I've signed up to support that bill that said we shouldn't get paid without a budget, because where we end up is this sequestration deal, which I will tell you, I think the lesson from this is when you have an absence of leadership, and the majority leader thinks it's foolish to have a budget, when you have an absence of leadership from our commander-in-chief, who is not prioritizing solving this. Right now, he should be here calling all of us to the table to resolve this on behalf of our national security. Where you end up is you put our country at risk. And the foremost responsibility that we have to the American people under our Constitution is to keep them safe. If we don't have that, we don't have anything else. And we have seen with the events over the last few days that, as Senator McCain has said, the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, and certainly someone no one is more knowledgeable about national security than Senator McCain in this body. And I will tell you this, that he's right. It's a dangerous time in the world right now with what we're facing. And we have Iran trying to acquire the capability of having a nuclear weapon. We have the Middle East unraveling right now, and there's an absence of American leadership, unfortunately. And where this sequestration leads us is if we take, in addition to the $487 million in reductions we're already doing to our Department of Defense, another $500 billion off that, with what we see happening around the world and also the risk to our country, terrorists who still want to kill us for who we are and what we believe in, then, as our own Secretary of Defense has said, catastrophic, leading to a hollow force. Shooting ourselves in the head is what our Secretary of Defense has said. Irresponsible. Inflict severe...
Isn't it true, if I'd ask the senator from New Hampshire, that we went to your state and met before and with a major defense industry in the state of New Hampshire? Employs thousands of people.
I would say, Senator McCain, yes. In fact, I was at a major defense employer in my state on Monday, the same employer we went to, BAE, and what
are they saying?
What they say is that they're really worried about sequestration because there are thousands of jobs at stake in New Hampshire, but also, more importantly, the capacity to make sure that our troops have the very best equipment, the very best technology, and that we can prevent attacks on our country, and most importantly, when we send our troops into harm's way, that they are protected. And we have a responsibility to them. So there are jobs at stake. There's safety to our troops. When we talk about hollowing out our force, we mean putting our troops at risk. And finally, not only that, but we think about our safety, but there's real jobs at stake. As the senator from Arizona has said, my state, the estimate is 3,600 jobs on the defense end, over 1 million jobs in this country. And let's face it, right now, I saw the workers. I've talked to them. They're really worried that we're not going to take up responsibility here, that there's an absence of leadership. Where's the commander-in-chief on this? Of all the things that the president has responsibility for, this cannot be punted till after an election. This should not be used as a bargaining chip for other goals that he wants to accomplish to increase taxes in this country. He should be at the table right now. We are all willing to sit down and to listen to the ideas and to compromise on the other side, but we need the leadership of our president to do that. And I understand if he's too busy campaigning to do that, but this is too important
Could I ask
after an election.
Could I ask the senator from Alabama, isn't it true that if these cuts are enacted in the fashion that they are, that we're going to have a serious impact on our economy to the point where it could result in even negative growth, according to objective studies?
The Congressional Budget Office and others, as Senator Thune indicated, have said that if the tax increases are imposed and the sequester cuts are done, we will could go back into another recession. The last thing we need to get this budget under control and our finances under control is another recession. It would be unthinkable for us to take action that would put us in that kind of context. So, and we have, as you know, Senator McCain, requirements by the defense contractors and any government contractor when they know that they're not going to be able, under the law, to keep the number of people employed, they have to send them notice that they're going to be laid off in advance so they can have an opportunity to find other work. And they're sending out those notices now, and that has a depressing effect on the economy, I think. So it is a very serious matter for the economy. But most important to me is when you start playing games with the production and procurement of weapon systems and things, you cost the government more money, don't you, Senator McCain? When you're producing 100 widgets and then you go to 50 widgets and back to 100, doesn't the government often have to pay penalties, and doesn't it drive up cost?
And wouldn't it be true if you are a defense contractor today that you literally have no ability to make plans for what your company, a corporation, would be expected to do on the 1st of January of 2013?
Absolutely, that's correct. Under the law, these cuts will take place in January. That will happen unless we pass a law to change it, unless we take action to change it. Why are we going to wait to December 31st? Is that when we're going to deal with this? As Senator Ayotte was suggesting, we should, why we should do it now? The responsible thing is to fix this problem now and not leave the Defense Department in turmoil. They won't even send us answer to Senator Thune and I and McCain's request for where the cuts are going to occur, because I guess they don't want to, or they don't know yet. But this is turmoil within the department.
But if the senator from Alabama would yield on that, I think it's really important, again, to point out that this could be avoided, and actually the House of Representatives, because they passed a budget, tried to avoid it. They addressed this in their budget. They redistributed these reductions. They did away with the 50% whack that the Defense Department would get, which is disproportionate relative to its share of the budget. Defense represents 20%, about a fifth of the budget, or a sixth of the budget, as the senator from Alabama has pointed out, but gets 50% of the cuts. But the House of Representatives, and the Democrats have been down here attacking for the last couple of days the, quote, Ryan budget, the House-passed budget. At least they had a budget. We haven't had a budget for 3 years in the United States Senate.
Isn't that known as chutzpah? To come down and attack
audacity.
The other body's budget when you haven't done a budget for 3 years, which is required by law. Now that, you've got to hand it to them. You have got to hand it to them. I congratulate my friends on the other side of the aisle who come down and attack the other side's budget when they haven't done one iota in 3 years. Congratulations for new levels of hypocrisy.
With this senator from Arizona yield, I would also call that hypocrisy. I mean, really, when you have no plan yourself for the fiscal state of the country, when you're unwilling to actually do the work of the Budget Committee, when you call it foolish, and by the way, when the President's own budget gets 0 votes from the own members of his own party.
The President did have a budget, got 0 votes. Not a single member on the other side of the aisle voted for their own President's budget, but will come down and attack a budget proposal, which, by the way, puts us on a path to a balanced budget which there is certainly no proposal that I have ever seen coming from the other side. In fact, the answer, according to them, is spend more money. Spend more money. Let's have more jobs, more of everything. And then, obviously, that has not been a very successful approach over the last 3.5 years. And again, you know, I don't mean to be too repetitive, but here we are. What are we debating? A jobs bill. Sounds great. Sounds great, the Veterans Job Bill. What could be better? What could be more important? Well, we've got 6 Veterans Jobs Program. They haven't succeeded, and the fact is that we are not addressing the needs of the men and women in the military and who will be veterans someday. We're not providing them with the equipment, the training, and the wherewithal to defend this nation by by ignoring sequestration and not taking up a National Defense Authorization Act. My friends, I think the American people see through this charade that we are conducting in these last few days before we go out to campaign, and try to see if there's any Americans who are in that we could meet any Americans who are in that 11% who say they still approve of Congress.
Senator McCain, we're going to have a lot more unemployed veterans if we don't fix this sequester, because it's clearly going to cause the Defense Department to reduce personnel in a significant number. Wouldn't you agree?
I would totally agree.
Senator Thune, you mentioned the Ryan budget, which is a historic budget, changes the debt course of America, puts us on a path to prosperity and not decline. It's an honest budget. Does it fix this sequester? Doesn't his budget do that, and isn't that proof that if we put our head together, we can develop a way to deal with a sequester,
Right.
And it's not impossible to do?
And it passed months ago, which would give the certainty that we all talk about the jobs impacted, the Warren Act notices that are going to go out, and all the uncertainty that's created by not knowing what the impact of this is going to be. Well, the House of Representatives months ago passed a budget which spelled out in clear detail how they would avoid these draconian cuts to the national security budget, replaced them with alternatives by finding reductions in spending in other areas of the budget, and put a budget out that actually accomplished that objective and avoided what we all know is going to be a disaster and a train wreck at the end of the year. So what happens? Well, the United States Senate, the world's greatest deliberative body, doesn't pass a budget for the 3rd year in a row. And so here we are at the 11th hour, less than 4 months away from when this thing would take effect, with defense contractors sending pink slips out to employees in the very near future. And the United States Senate has done nothing to avoid what we know is a very, very predictable crisis. Everybody knows this is coming. The Congressional Budget Office is predicting it. The Federal Reserve is predicting it. Outside analysts are predicting it. Everybody knows that the combination of tax increases on January 1st and these dramatic cuts in the Defense Department are going to take the country into a place economically that we don't want to go. And in most cases, according to the CBO, they've said it's going to take us back into a recession. They're predicting 2.9% contraction in the economy in the first 6 months of next year, and unemployment over 9%. It's not like we don't see this coming. And yet here we are, as Senator McCain pointed out, we're talking about small ball stuff. I mean, we're doing things that, in somebody's opinion, I'm sure is important. But we know we've got a disaster looking us right in the eye, and we aren't doing anything to address it. And again, it all starts with the failure by this institution, the United States Senate, the world's greatest deliberative body, not even to pass a budget, our most fundamental responsibility. And the ranking member in the Budget Committee, the senator from Alabama, knows full well. The senator from New Hampshire is also a member of that committee. You know, I'm not sure why our committee exists if we're not going to pass a budget, but we haven't done it now under the Democrat leadership here in the United States Senate for 3 consecutive years.
Oh, Mr. President, I do believe that we're at a point in history that this Congress has a responsibility. The sequester cannot be carried out in the way it's written today. It will do severe damage to the Defense Department. We're going to fix it at some point. It only makes good sense and good business for us to fix it now to avoid the disruptions that are ongoing in our Department of Defense. Now, I say we will fix it. I know there are a number of friends of the President who have long desired severe cuts in the Defense Department. He said he doesn't, but he's, at this point, taking action that I can only conclude indicates that he favors these reductions to occur. And the only way he might not do it is if we have a tax increase that he'd like to see occur. I believe this is a...
On that point, too, because it looks like what they're doing is running out the clock, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean, they have a requirement by September 6th, by last week, to produce at least their proposal. It was by law. We passed it. He signed it into law back in August. It was required last week. We haven't seen it yet. It looks to me like what they're doing is trying to run the clock out, hoping Congress is going to go home to campaign. They will not have had to do anything to deal with this until the lame duck, at which point they can use defense cuts as leverage to try and get tax increases. I mean, it's pretty plain what's going on here. But they have a requirement under the law to produce that. They haven't done it. You and I were authors of that legislation. The senator from New Hampshire has been a great leader in trying to get the administration to put their proposal for implementation in front of us. That hasn't happened. That's, I think, the only conclusion that anybody can draw.
Well, Senator from New Hampshire campaigned on this, I know, and talked about these issues, and I guess it's been frustrating to serve on the Budget Committee and the Armed Services Committee for you to see as much dysfunction as is occurring.
It has. We have to do a budget, I would say, to the senator from Alabama and the senator from South Dakota for our country. And we need to make sure that we protect our national security. And that's why this problem has to be solved now. We need leadership from the President as Commander-in-Chief. And I would point out in response to the comments from the senator from South Dakota that not only has the Department of Defense has ignored this law of producing a plan as to how they're going to implement sequestration, the administration went as far as to have the Department of Labor issue an order saying employers don't comply with the law and the WARN Act to tell employees that your job may be at risk, to issue a layoff notice. That's how far the administration is going in not wanting to take this issue head on. But it's too important to the American people. We've got to resolve it. We are willing to try to resolve it. I'm the co-sponsor also of another bill that would come up with alternative spending reductions to resolve it. We've got to do it now. We owe this to the American people. We owe this to our men and women in uniform. And again, if we do a budget, we do what's right for our country, we'd never find ourselves in this situation. And I see the Republican leader here and certainly believe that we would like to hear from the Republican leader and would end this colloquy and defer our time to the leader.
Madam President, we'll yield back the balance of our time. Or Mr. President, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Mr. President. Republican leader.
The attacks this week on our diplomats, our installations, and diplomatic security personnel have reminded all of us of the service of these brave Americans, the service that they render to our country every single day. From the deadly attacks on a U.S. diplomatic station in Benghazi, to the attack on our embassy in Cairo, and now another attack on another embassy last night in Yemen. 4 Americans are dead. Our flag is being desecrated. This is a moment for Americans to show our closest allies in the Middle East that we stand with them unequivocally, no mixed signals. Neither Israel nor any of our allies should ever have any reason to doubt that resolve. Now, I'm encouraged that Turkey has condemned the violence in Benghazi. There's absolutely no justification for what happened in Cairo, Benghazi, or Yemen. None. We must do everything within our power to protect our representatives overseas and hunt down those responsible for these attacks. There were warnings yesterday that other attacks on other embassies may be imminent. This is a gravely serious moment. But America does not shrink from the defense of its core values or its interests overseas. We must project strength. The unrest in the Middle East, in Libya, Egypt, and especially the Sinai, Yemen, and Syria present a profound and formidable challenge to our interests. In addition to the U.S. Central Command and to our allies, none of our nation's enemies, Al-Qaeda, other violent extremists, Hezbollah, and especially Iran, should view this moment as a window of American vulnerability. Now is the moment to send a clear signal to long-standing allies like Israel that they can rely on our support. And every member of our armed services, diplomatic corps, and intelligence community should know that they have our support and gratitude in the challenging days that lie ahead. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The senator from West Virginia.
I thank the distinguished presiding officer from the great state of Pennsylvania. Mr. President, I rise today to talk about the so-called Ryan budget plan, endorsed and fully absorbed by Governor Romney, which, when you read it, is nothing more than a diabolical blueprint for slashing services that help families, seniors, and children all across the country. The Ryan-Romney plan, which is the centerpiece of the Republican presidential campaign, and certainly will grow more so, has finally come under the new scrutiny that it needed as people got a good look at it leading up to the GOP convention last month. I, for one, have been ashamed of this document for much longer. I was proud the Senate voted against it, although it was equally discouraging that a majority of the House voted for it. I'm here today because I want to set the record straight on what the Ryan-Romney plan, in my judgment, would do to people in my home state of West Virginia, to your home state, Mr. President, and to the country. The Ryan budget proposal tackles the deficit by shredding something called the safety net. And if people aren't clear what that is, it's the net of public policy underneath the worst possible situation that somebody can come to in terms of health care or inability to live. Families have counted on that safety net for years in rough times because they've had that safety net, and they've used that safety net. In essence, the unbalanced Ryan proposal guts programs for seniors, people who are disabled, children, families struggling to make ends meet, and then the fascinating turning those cuts into a $4 trillion worth of tax breaks for the very wealthiest Americans and large corporations. And that's said a lot, and people say class welfare, but it's math. It's mathematics. They give the average millionaire a tiny little tax cut of $265,000 under the Ryan-Romney plan, while desperately undermining our economy. He says he hopes that his plan will balance the budget by 2040. That's not very encouraging, and it's probably optimistic on his part if it were ever to take place. The Ryan plan does not contribute a single penny to deficit reduction, which is the great problem that we're facing and which we're going to deal with. Not a single penny. Consider how they shred health care. With $2.9 trillion in health care cuts, not just from repealing health care reform, an amazing thing to do, but also by gutting Medicare and Medicaid. in the passing of the Health Care Act, all of a sudden 30 million Americans, by no means all those who are uninsured, get health insurance coverage. The Act makes sure that they get health insurance coverage. The Ryan budget, backed by Romney, would take that possibility away from 30 million people who have lived without health insurance for many years. The Ryan-Romney plan would take Medicare, that more than 50 million seniors rely on, and turn it into a privatized voucher system. I know this has been said, and it's been said because it's true. They would cap how much the government spends on seniors' health care, regardless of their health care needs, letting profit-seeking private health insurance companies decide what to cover and what not to cover. Well, that alone costs seniors an additional, every individual senior, an additional $6,000 per year if that plan were to come into effect. If seniors are not able to pay the difference, then they are simply out of luck under the Ryan-Romney budget plan. This plan also rips apart the Medicaid program by turning it into a block grant program. On this one, I get pretty indignant. Right now, Medicaid is a lifeline to 70 million Americans, including families and children living in or near poverty. Medicaid today provides long-term care for more than half of seniors in the United States of America. They can spend down, get rid of their assets so they qualify for Medicaid so they can get long-term care. And there isn't anybody in this country, in this building, in this country, who isn't going to be faced with long-term care. The difference is that some can pay for it, some will have families absorb it through love and cultural tradition, but most can't. They have to have help. The only place, there's a little bit that's in Medicare, but it's virtually all in Medicaid that provides long-term care. That's when you're in your declining years. That's when you're approaching death. That's when you're at your most dangerous and vulnerable situation. That's when you're scared. That's when your children come from other states to try to help, but then they start spending down their money that they save for their kids to go to college. It's a desperate situation, even as it is today, with full Medicaid coverage. The fact is, and what would happen is that there would be, this would affect those who need care at home, a lot of home health, and it would also affect seniors in nursing homes in terrible ways. The fact is that middle-income families in this country cannot afford the $80,000 or more per year that it costs to keep a loved one in a nursing home, in something called long-term care. Now, the only way to do it without bankrupting the entire family is with the help of Medicaid. Yes, it's a big program. Yes, we're going to have to face reality in some respects on its size. But scaling back Medicaid the way they do it in the Ryan-Romney plan so badly hurts American families. And it forces state governments to do things which they are not going to be able to afford to do. They're going to have to cut services, or they're going to have to go more deeply into debt themselves. So the real prospect of people in their 70s, 80s, 90s, et cetera, with no long-term care because of a theological point of view that government is awful. But what this is awful to is people. It's just terrible for people. The Ryan-Romney plan would mean millions more America could not afford basic health care, and we know what happens next. More people get sick with untreated illnesses, and then health care costs go up for everyone. oh, well, that implies that people get health care. Well, yeah, they do, because they can go to the emergency room of the hospital, not always get services, but for the most part get those services. But they're not paying for that. The average American is, which adds about $2,000 to their family budget every year, paying for other people's health care because the uninsured don't have insurance and therefore they have no place to go. And so the idea of repealing the Health Care Act and taking 30 million Americans, I mean, it really, if we'd had more money, we would have done the 45 or 50 who are really uninsured and underinsured and taken care of them, but we didn't have the money to do that. The nursing homes and the 1.8 million people who work there would be forced to slash their services, slash or close their doors, or certainly turn away seniors. In their frenzy to repeal health care reform, and with not a single proposal to replace it, the great silence, Ryan Romney would also completely undo all of the new consumer protections to fight back against cruel health insurance practices. I chair the Commerce Committee, and that's about all we dealt with for the past 2 years, health insurance companies and their practices. And it's pretty depressing. For example, the new provision ending discrimination by health insurance companies against people with pre-existing conditions. That's law. Well, under Ryan Romney, that would end. And I reiterate that women who are pregnant, millions of Americans who have diabetes, people with asthma, people with acne, have frequently been just turned down by health insurance companies when they ruled the roost. Now they don't rule the roost under the new health care bill, and a lot of money is being rebated to American people who were overcharged. The reform that we passed allows parents to keep their children on their insurance plan until the kids are 26 years old. Mr. President, that's one of the most popular things in the country. That would disappear under the Ryan Romney budget plan. And understand that there's a lot of lack of understanding of the health care bill, and it's not wildly popular in some parts of the country and where you and I come from, Mr. President. That's true. But on the other hand, when you think of it as a bill, people don't know what's in it. When you explain to people what's in it and you give them examples like this, up until the age of 26, you can stay in your family's health insurance plan, curtailing the restrictions, lifetime limits, the annual limits first and then lifetime limits in 2014, they're lifted so that people get the health care that they need. Pretty much every night on television you see stories of kids born with some terrible set of health problems. And I remember one that I talked with, an 8-year-old boy and his family who had cancer, and he had run into his annual lifetime limit. Well, he died. This was 2 years ago. He died. He wouldn't have died under the Health Care Act. But the Romney-Ryan people want to scrap all of that. One thing that's very well known is the prescription drug donut hole, which our reform bill actually had closed. It's a very big deal. It's very hard to understand how that comes about. What is a donut hole? But seniors understand it because they spend quite a lot of time paying premiums to health insurance company, but getting no benefits or health care coverage during that period in which they're in the donut hole. We stopped that in the health care bill. That would be repealed. They'd open that donut hole right back up, the Ryan-Romney budget plan, putting that $4,200 per year right back on the shoulders of our individual seniors all across the country. You see a pattern here. It's absolutely appalling. It's appalling. They don't talk about it, but even Social Security is threatened by their plans. Social Security is a contract that the American people have made with themselves. Virtually everyone pays in throughout their working years so that everyone has a safety net when they retire, or they become disabled, or they die young and have others in their family to care for, and leaving a surviving spouse and children to struggle without help. Under our bill, of course, nothing has changed. They want to change that. Paul Ryan, for whatever reason, has been trying since 2004 to privatize Social Security. And he just flat out has. He can say what he wants. He can say he doesn't think that anymore. Actually, he doesn't say that. But that's what he believes, because if you've been doing something for the last 10 years, you probably believe in it pretty strongly. Meaning, he would like to see the American people bet their retirement savings on the stock market, which is usually not stable. Well, I don't buy that. West Virginians don't buy that. Just think back to 2008, when the financial crisis hit. If every American had privatized Social Security accounts then, their retirement security would have been wiped out. Instead, while many people lost a whole lot of money in that stock market crash back then, their Social Security benefits were safe, and they knew it. People are fragile, Mr. President. Not everybody is a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur. Not everybody is born wealthy. People are living at the edge. Psychologically, they're living even more closely to the edge. Fear comes to them easily. So when you do something good, like pass a health care bill which is going to help them, and then people come in and say, well, we're going to repeal the whole act and everything about it, and then, yes, something about Social Security too, it's cruel. It's appalling, and it's cruel. We need to protect and strengthen Social Security, not destroy it. And don't just take that from me. There's a far-ranging opposition to the Ryan-Romney budget plan from economists to religious leaders. A group of Catholic bishops, this interested me greatly, because the candidate for vice president on the Republican ticket says that he got his sort of social values from his Catholic teaching. Well, there's a group of Catholic bishops recently asked Republicans to stop championing Ryan's drastic proposal because they were appalled by it. Catholics are very strong on that, on fairness for people, and always have been, because it's so hurtful to the poor. It fails their morality test. And my colleague, Senator Kent Conrad, shared with us this week an amazing quote that I cannot stop myself from giving to you because it was from one of Ronald Reagan's economic advisors, a fellow named Bruce Bartlett, which bears repeating. He said the following, and this is in quotes until I stop using the quotes. He says, distributionally, the Ryan plan is a monstrosity. The rich would receive huge tax cuts while the social safety net would be shredded to pay for those tax cuts. Even as an opening bid to begin budget negotiations with the Democrats, the Ryan Plan cannot be taken seriously. It is less of a wish list than a fairy tale, utterly disconnected from the real world, backed up by make-believe numbers and unreasonable assumptions. Ryan's plan isn't even an act of courage, Bruce Bartlett says. It's simply pandering to the Tea Party. Well, I think Mr. Ryan is of the Tea Party, so I don't know his need to pander to it, but anyway, that's what this Reagan person indicated. A real act of courage would have been for him to admit, as all serious budget analysts know, that revenues will have to rise well above 19% of GDP to stabilize the debt, close quote. In the coming weeks and months, we will continue to hear a lot of back and forth about the heartless policy proposals coming from Paul Ryan and members of Congress who support his plan. Mr. President, this is a deadly serious debate, deadly serious, with enormous consequences for our country and for every person in it. It is my sincere and urgent hope that as more Americans come to understand exactly where the Ryan-Romney plan would take our nation in its life-saving programs and others, and that they will decide to run in the opposite direction, away from it. The Republican budget is a slap in the face to millions of Americans. We can and will reduce our deficit. We're going to do that because we have to. There's a strong and enduring consensus on that point. But we do not have to do it this way, and we must not do it this way. I thank the Chair, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from North Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to speak on the Veterans Job Bill. That's the legislation before us. We voted on it last night. We'll likely be voting on it again today and possibly tomorrow. So I rise to speak on that bill. I've, in fact, offered an amendment to the bill because we should do all we can to support our veterans. It's very important. They put their very lives on the line for us, and we need to do all that we can to support them, but we need to do it the right way. And that's why I'm offering this amendment. We're talking about creating jobs for our veterans. So the right way to do that is long-term jobs, quality employment, not short-term stimulus-type jobs. That's exactly why I'm offering this amendment to the legislation that would include approval of the Keystone XL pipeline project. The VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, is an organization that does a tremendous amount for our veterans. We all know the VFW. We all know the great work that they do on behalf of our veterans. The VFW is already working to help returning vets get jobs, and that's great. And they're working to help our returning veterans get jobs constructing the Keystone XL pipeline. The only problem is those jobs are in Canada. Those jobs are in Canada because we haven't approved the Keystone XL pipeline in the United States. After 4+ years, it's still in the permitting process. So since the administration has approved the project, we need to step up and approve the project, and we can do that. This amendment would do that. Now, let me tell you a little bit about what the VFW is doing to help veterans get jobs in the energy industry, doing things like building the Keystone XL pipeline, as I say, right now in Canada. The VFW, through VetJobs. Now, VetJobs is a job placement company of which the VFW owns 10%. So it's partially owned by the VFW. They're working with the Edmonton Economic Development Corp to hire Canadians in Edmonton and surrounding area up here in Alberta. And of course, you can see that's where the pipeline is being constructed, up in Canada. So they're working right now to hire vets to work on things, including the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. Now, several days ago, I spoke with Ted Daywalt. Ted Daywalt is the CEO of Vet Jobs. And he told me that in Alberta, they have listings in 17 different job categories, and that they could use between 12 and 15,000 people in Alberta, Canada, just working in the energy industry. Well, why not put those veterans to work right here at home, right? I mean, we all want to have a good quality job, but we'd like to have it near our home, right? Not having to go to a different country to get that work. The Perryman Group estimates that the Keystone XL pipeline will create 15,000 to 20,000 direct construction jobs right away, direct construction jobs right away, and that it will create thousands and thousands of permanent jobs in addition to those construction jobs. And that's without spending any tax dollars, that's without adding to the deficit, that's without adding to the debt. And that's jobs here at home, not in Canada. Also, TransCanada, the company that's building the Keystone XL pipeline, gives a hiring preference to veterans. They give a hiring preference to veterans in Canada. They give a hiring preference to veterans in the United States. And in fact, they also support and sponsor a program. It's actually delivered by a nonprofit entity. It's called Helmets to Hard Hats. Helmets to Hard Hats. What they do is they train returning veterans. They train returning veterans so they can do these kind of jobs. So we can make these quality jobs, long-term jobs, permanent jobs available right away, right here in the United States by supporting this amendment. You know, in addition, we get more safe, dependable, reliable energy. Anyone check gas prices recently? They're more than $3.80 a gallon average in this country. That's more than double what they were when this administration started in office. And there's another benefit as well. We reduce our dependence on oil from the Middle East. Now compare this amendment, compare this legislation to the Veterans Job Corps proposal that we're looking at in the bill that's under consideration right now here on the Senate floor. So the Veterans Job Corps proposal spends $1 billion. Okay, so here we are, at this time, $16 trillion in debt, and that's growing. So here we have legislation that spends $1 billion to create government jobs for our veterans. Well, let's take a look at those jobs. It's $1 billion. We want to create 20,000 jobs with that $1 billion. That means $50,000 a job, right? Okay, for 1 year. For 1 year. Then what do you do? So now we've created we spent $1 billion, we've created a bunch of temporary jobs for 1 year. Then what does our veteran do? Do we end up spending more then to try to keep it going? Where does this go? Instead of doing that, by approving this legislation that I've offered, we can create thousands more jobs, and we don't spend anything, and it creates tax revenues, it creates economic activity, it helps reduce the debt and the deficit, it helps us generate more energy for this country instead of more government spending and a bigger deficit and temporary jobs. Now, I think our veterans would very much appreciate knowing that they're working on producing and transporting more energy for this country, that they're helping reduce gas prices at the pump for our hardworking taxpayers and our consumers. I think they would also appreciate the fact that we're working to reduce our dependence on oil from the Middle East. You know, maybe then we wouldn't have to send them back to the Middle East for energy or security reasons. I think our veterans would very much appreciate it. So the proposal we're putting forward creates jobs, permanent jobs, and it creates them the right way. And I encourage support for it because it is about supporting creating jobs in this country the right way and supporting jobs for our veterans. This amendment is about jobs, and it will help our veterans. It's about energy. It will help hardworking Americans with gas prices at the pump. It's about economic growth, which will help our economy. Economic growth and better control of spending is what we need to do to address the deficit and the debt. This legislation is about energy security to make our nation more energy secure. So here's my concluding questions. Why wouldn't we vote on this amendment? Why wouldn't we have a vote on this amendment? And then why wouldn't we approve it for the benefit of our economy, for the benefit of the American people in our country, and for the benefit of our veterans? Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. President,
The senator from New York,
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. President, it's nice to see Paul Ryan back here in Congress. It'll be even nicer to see him back here as a full-time member in January. Now, there have been a lot of controversy about Mr. Ryan and some of the things he says and what he states, why he states them, and the contrast with what he says and what he has done. But perhaps the least credible claim of all about Congressman Ryan is the idea that he's a serious deficit hawk and that his budget is a serious attempt at deficit reduction. He's not, and it's not. The Paul Ryan budget is about ideology rather than common-sense solutions to the country's economic and fiscal problems. And as more and more people are learning, it certainly isn't about, as Bill Clinton said, arithmetic. In Ryan's budget, any savings achieved by his plan to privatize Medicare and gut investments in the middle class do not go to reducing the deficit. He's saying he's creating that pain because we need the pain for deficit reduction. But he uses all those savings to pay for further tax cuts to the wealthy. This chart explains it pretty well. Independent studies have found that the Ryan budget would raise taxes on the middle class by about $2,600, up to $2,600. People between $50,000 and $100,000 pay $1,300 more a year. People between $100,000 and $200,000 pay $2,600 more a year. And then there are whopping savings for people whose income is over $1 million, $285,000. As a result of the massive giveaways to the wealthiest Americans, the Congressional Budget Office found that Ryan's plan failed to balance the budget until 2040. But even this conclusion relies on rosy assumptions supplied to CBO by Ryan himself. Ryan's plan could take even longer to improve the fiscal outlook under a more realistic set of assumptions. Even taking the unrealistically rosy assumptions that Ryan stipulates in his budget, for instance, that revenue levels would be 19% of GDP, that's almost certainly not true, his plan wouldn't balance the budget until 2040. Independent experts like the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center have challenged these assumptions. Under more realistic assumptions, Ryan's plan could take far longer to balance the budget and cause the federal debt to rise even further. Moreover, Ryan's spending cuts are unrealistic, totally. Outside of Medicare and Medicaid, Mr. Ryan would slash the government, including defense, to 3.75% of GDP by 2050. Defense alone is 4.6 today. According to CBO, the total has never been below 8% since World War II, and defense has never been below 3%. So Mr. Ryan would either have to make massive defense cuts, the very same defense cuts he decried on the campaign trail yesterday, or he would need to virtually eliminate the rest of the government: transportation, security, FBI, education, scientific research, food testing. We know that's not going to happen. The larger point is this. In terms of deficit reduction, the Ryan plan is, no other way to state it, a fraud. This should come as no surprise. After all, Congressman Ryan supported the Bush policies that got us into this deep fiscal hole in the first place. From the Bush tax cuts to 2 unfunded wars to the paid-for creation of Medicare Part D, Congressman Ryan's fingerprints are all over the big-spending Bush policies that turned Bill Clinton's record surpluses into the record deficits inherited by Barack Obama. Ryan voted against the Simpson-Bowles framework. When Paul Ryan had a chance to walk the walk on deficit reduction, he joined all the other House Republicans on the commission in voting down the report. He urged Speaker Boehner to abandon the grand bargain talks with President Obama. The New York Times reported in 2011, Ryan appealed to Representative Cantor to cut off negotiations between the Speaker and White House because he didn't feel the terms of the emerging agreement adhered strictly enough to his conservative principles, and the deal might politically benefit President Obama. So, It is not a secret that the Ryan budget both hurts the middle class and does nothing for deficit reduction. The only people who would benefit are the very wealthy, and God bless them. They're doing well in America, but as recent statistics just showed, they're the only people gaining income. And one other thing I'd like to add about Mr. Ryan here. He seems like a nice man, nice family, but his recent speeches have just been so revealing, and he did the same thing yesterday once again, showing he has learned nothing from the mistakes he's made in the last few weeks. When it comes to the big debates facing our country, Paul Ryan either has an extremely poor memory or has a tendency to play fast and loose with the facts. In one speech, Congressman Ryan falsely blamed President Obama for shuttering the GM plant that actually announced it was closing during President Bush's term, for $716 million in Medicare savings that Congressman Ryan included in his own budget, and third, for the failure of the Simpson-Bowles blueprint that Congressman Ryan himself voted against. Now, that's just a sampling. That's just a sampling. And just yesterday, he did it again. There you go again, Paul Ryan. He was back at a speech in Wisconsin. He blamed the president, solely the president, for the year-end trigger, the sequestration, that was part of the Budget Control Act. Never mind that Congressman Ryan voted for the very same sequestration himself. Never mind, it was his side's idea, in fact, to hold our credit rating hostage in the first place and insist on these dollar-for-dollar cuts he now decries. Never mind the fact that we all know that if Paul Ryan had opposed the sequestration proposal, chairman of the Budget Committee in the House, it certainly would have failed. And now he goes to Wisconsin and says the president's to blame for sequestration. It's the same thing he did with Simpson-Bowles. It's not fair. It's not right. All one can do is shake your head at this kind of what's good for me is not good for you, this kind of double standard. So I'd say to Paul Ryan, you haven't learned much from your mistakes of the past few weeks. There you go again. Your budget proves it, and you're even up to your speeches yesterday prove it again. Madam President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.